The bitter wind of Midgard howled across the fjords as I, Bjorn Ironhand, trudged through the snow-laden pine forest. My leather boots crunched against the frozen ground, each step echoing through the desolate wilderness that stretched endlessly before me. The pale winter sun hung low in the sky, casting long shadows through the towering trees that seemed to reach toward Asgard itself. I had been hunting for 3 days now, tracking a wounded elk through these treacherous mountains. The beast's blood trail had grown fainter with each passing hour, and my supplies were running dangerously low. My stomach growled with fierce hunger, reminding me that I hadn't eaten a proper meal since leaving my village of Ravenshollow. The dried fish and stale bread in my leather pouch would barely sustain me through another night in this unforgiving landscape. As the son of Ericsson the Bold, I carried the weight of my family's reputation on my broad shoulders. My father had been one of the most feared warriors in all of Norway, his battle axe singing songs of victory across countless raids. Now, at 25 winters old, I struggled to live up to his legendary status. The other warriors in our clan whispered behind my back, questioning whether the blood of heroes truly ran through my veins. The forest grew denser as I pressed deeper into the mountains. Ancient pine trees, their branches heavy with snow, formed a natural cathedral around me. The silence was profound, broken only by the occasional crack of ice-laden branches and the distant cry of ravens circling overhead. These black-feathered messengers of Odin seemed to mock my futile quest, their harsh calls echoing off the rocky cliffs that surrounded this forgotten valley. It was then that I heard it, a sound that made my blood run cold. A low, pitiful whimpering echoed from somewhere ahead, unlike anything I had ever encountered in all my years of hunting these northern lands. The sound was neither wolf nor bear, but something far more mysterious and ancient. My hand instinctively moved to the iron-forged axe hanging from my belt, its familiar weight providing some comfort in this moment of uncertainty. Following the sound through a narrow passage between two massive boulders, I emerged into a small clearing where the snow lay pristine and undisturbed. There, huddled against the base of a towering oak tree, was a sight that defied all my understanding of the natural world. A creature no larger than a newborn calf lay shivering in the snow, its scales shimmering with an otherworldly luminescence even in the dim light. The beast was unmistakably a dragon, though unlike the massive fire-breathing monsters from the old tales my grandmother used to tell by the flickering flames of our hearth. This was clearly a youngling, its wings folded tightly against its body for warmth. The scales along its back were a deep emerald green, fading to gold along its belly. Its eyes, large and intelligent, regarded me with a mixture of fear and desperate hope. The dragon pup was clearly starving. Its ribs showed prominently through its scaled hide, and its breathing was shallow and labored. Snow had gathered on its wings and back, and I could see that it lacked the strength to shake it off. Those ancient eyes, wise beyond the creature's apparent youth, seemed to plead with me for mercy and aid. Every instinct screamed at me to flee. Dragons were creatures of legend and nightmare, beings that brought destruction and death wherever they flew. The skalds sang of heroes who slayed such beasts, not those who showed them kindness. Yet something in those emerald eyes stayed my hand and calmed my racing heart. I slowly approached the creature, my movements deliberate and non-threatening. The dragon pup watched me warily but made no attempt to attack or flee. Perhaps it was too weak, or perhaps some deeper understanding passed between us in that moment. As I drew closer, I could hear its stomach rumbling with hunger, a sound remarkably similar to my own. Without fully understanding why, I reached into my leather pouch and withdrew the last of my dried fish. The salty, preserved meat was all that stood between me and starvation, yet I found myself extending it toward the desperate creature. The dragon pup's nostrils flared as it caught the scent of food, and it lifted its head with what little strength it possessed. Carefully, gently, I placed the fish near the creature's muzzle. Its forked tongue darted out to taste the offering, and then it began to eat with desperate hunger. The sight of this magnificent being, reduced to such a pitiful state, stirred something deep within my warrior's heart. Perhaps it was the memory of my own childhood hunger during the harsh winter when the ships couldn't return from their raids, or perhaps it was simply the recognition of a fellow creature struggling to survive in this unforgiving world. As the dragon pup devoured my meager offering, I found myself speaking to it in low, soothing tones. "Easy there, little one," I murmured, my voice barely above a whisper. "You're safe now. No harm will come to you while I draw breath." The creature's eyes met mine, and I could swear I saw gratitude flickering in those ancient depths. I knew I should leave. Every moment I spent here was another step closer to my own doom. Without food, I would never make it back to Raven's Hollow alive. The mountain passes were treacherous, even for a well-fed warrior, and winter storms could strike without warning. Yet I found myself unable to abandon this helpless creature to its fate. The wind picked up, sending swirls of snow dancing through the clearing. The temperature was dropping rapidly as night approached, and I could feel the bite of the cold seeping through my wool cloak. The dragon pup shivered more violently, its small body struggling against the harsh elements. Making a decision that would have seemed madness to any other Viking warrior, I removed my thick fur cloak and gently draped it over the creature's trembling form. The dragon pup looked up at me with what I could only describe as wonder. Its breathing became more steady, and some color seemed to return to its pale golden belly scales. I settled down beside it, my back against the ancient oak tree, and prepared to share what warmth my body could provide through the long, cold night ahead. As darkness fell over the Norwegian wilderness, I found myself speaking to my unlikely companion about my life, my failures, and my dreams. I told it about my father's legacy and my own struggles to prove myself worthy of the Iron Hand name. The dragon pup listened with an attention that seemed almost human, occasionally making soft, chirping sounds that reminded me of the responses my youngest sister used to make when I told her bedtime stories. The night was long and bitterly cold. Several times I questioned the wisdom of my actions, wondering if I would be found frozen solid come morning, my body a testament to misguided compassion. Yet each time the dragon pup stirred and pressed closer to my side, seeking warmth and comfort, I knew I had made the right choice. As dawn finally broke over the mountain peaks, painting the snow-covered landscape in shades of rose and gold, I felt something I hadn't experienced in months. A sense of purpose that went beyond personal glory or family honor. The dragon pup was stronger now, its breathing steady and its eyes bright with renewed life. It looked at me with an expression that seemed to convey understanding far beyond its apparent youth. Standing slowly, my joints stiff from the cold night, I knew it was time to leave. I had done what I could for the creature, but my own survival now hung by the thinnest of threads. The journey back to Raven's Hollow would be perilous, made more so by my weakened state. Yet as I prepared to gather my belongings and begin the long trek home, I felt no regret for the choice I had made. The next morning brought with it a sound that made my Viking blood sing with both terror and awe. As I prepared to leave the clearing where I had spent the night with the dragon pup, a deep, resonant roar echoed across the mountain peaks, causing snow to cascade from the pine branches like a frozen waterfall. The very ground beneath my feet trembled, and I knew with absolute certainty that death was approaching on massive wings. The dragon pup beside me lifted its head, its emerald eyes suddenly bright with recognition and joy. It attempted to chirp in response, though its voice was still weak from its ordeal. The answering call from above was immediate, a maternal cry filled with both relief and mounting fury. I had heard that same tone from the mothers in my village when they discovered their children in danger, but magnified 100-fold, and backed by the power of an ancient, primordial force. Through the canopy of snow-laden branches, I caught my first glimpse of the approaching beast. The mother dragon was enormous, easily 3 times the length of our largest longship. Her scales were a deeper, more lustrous green than her offspring's, with veins of gold running along her serpentine neck like rivers of molten metal. Her wings, spread wide against the pale morning sky, cast shadows that turned the clearing into a temporary twilight. My warrior's instinct screamed at me to draw my axe, to die fighting, as befitted a son of Ericsson the Bold. Yet something held my hand still at my side. Perhaps it was the memory of the trust I had seen in the pup's eyes, or perhaps I understood, on some primal level, that no weapon forged by mortal hands could hope to harm such a magnificent creature. Instead, I stood my ground, meeting the ancient being's gaze with as much courage as I could muster. The mother dragon landed with earth-shaking force, her massive talons digging deep furrows in the frozen ground. Snow and debris exploded outward from the impact, and I had to shield my eyes from the stinging particles. When the air cleared, I found myself staring into eyes like molten amber, filled with an intelligence that predated human civilization by countless centuries. For a moment that seemed to stretch into eternity, we regarded each other in silence. The mother's great head swayed slightly as she studied me, her nostrils flaring as she caught my scent mixed with that of her offspring. I could feel the heat radiating from her massive form, melting the snow in an ever-widening circle around her. The very air seemed to shimmer with barely contained power. Then her attention turned to her pup, and the change in her demeanor was immediate and profound. The terrible predator vanished, replaced by a concerned parent. She lowered her great head to nuzzle her offspring, soft rumbling sounds emanating from deep within her chest. The dragon pup responded with weak but joyful chirps, pressing against its mother's snout with obvious relief and affection. As I watched this reunion, I became aware of something that chilled my blood more than any winter storm. The mother dragon's examination of her pup was revealing things that were stoking the fires of her rage. She could see the starvation that had nearly claimed her child's life, could smell the desperation and fear that had clung to the youngling. Her great head turned back toward me, and I saw the fury building behind those ancient eyes. The roar that erupted from her throat was like nothing I had ever heard, part battle cry, part anguish, part promise of vengeance. It shook snow from every tree in the clearing and sent a family of ravens fleeing in panic from their roost. I felt the sound in my bones, in my very soul, and knew that I was moments away from being reduced to ash and memory. But then something miraculous happened. The dragon pup, despite its weakness, positioned itself between its mother and me. The little creature's actions spoke louder than any words could have. It chirped insistently at its mother, occasionally glancing back at me with what I could only interpret as gratitude. The great dragon's fury faltered as she looked down at her offspring, confusion replacing rage in those molten eyes. The pup continued its explanation in the musical language of dragons, a sound like wind chimes caught in a gentle breeze. I couldn't understand the words, but the meaning was clear enough. The little one was telling its mother how I had found it, how I had shared my food, how I had given it warmth through the deadly night. With each chirp and trill, I saw the mother dragon's expression change, her rage cooling like iron removed from the forge. Finally, the great beast turned her attention back to me, but the murderous intent was gone from her gaze. Instead, I saw something that might have been curiosity, or perhaps even respect. She studied me for long moments, her great head tilting slightly, as if trying to understand the motivations of this strange, small creature who had shown kindness to her offspring. When she spoke, her voice was like distant thunder, each word carefully formed and weighted with power. "Human!" she rumbled, and hearing my own language from such a being sent chills down my spine. "You gave aid to my child when you could have fled. You shared your sustenance when you yourself faced starvation. Why?" The question hung in the air between us, like smoke from a funeral pyre. I realized that my answer would likely determine whether I lived or died in this moment. Yet as I looked into those ancient eyes, I knew that only truth would suffice. This being would see through any deception as easily as looking through still water. "Because it was the right thing to do," I replied, my voice steady despite my racing heart. "I saw a creature in need, and I could not walk away. My father taught me that true strength is not measured in the enemies you slay, but in the mercy you show to those who cannot defend themselves." The mother dragon considered my words in silence that stretched like a taut bowstring. Around us, the forest seemed to hold its breath, waiting for her judgment. Even the wind had died to a whisper, as if nature itself dared not interrupt this moment of decision. Finally, she nodded slowly, a gesture that seemed strange coming from such a massive creature. "Your father was wise, Bjorn Ironhand," she said, and my blood chilled at hearing my name from her lips. "Yes, I know who you are. The dragons remember all the sons of heroes, especially those who choose compassion over conquest." She turned her great head toward her offspring, who was now standing on unsteady legs, its strength slowly returning. "My child tells me that you gave your last food to feed it, that you shared your warmth when you yourself faced the cold. Such kindness from your kind is unexpected." The admission seemed to cost her something, and I realized that dragons had likely suffered at the hands of humans before. How many of her kind had fallen to Viking axes and spears over the centuries? How many times had my people seen these magnificent creatures as nothing more than monsters to be slain for glory and gold? "Not all humans are the same," I said quietly, "just as I imagine not all dragons are the same. We each make our own choices." A sound that might have been laughter rumbled in the dragon's throat, spoken like one who has learned wisdom beyond his years. "Very well, Bjorn Ironhand. You have shown honor and mercy to mine own blood. Such deeds cannot go unrewarded." The great dragon moved with surprising grace for something so massive, stepping carefully around the clearing as if mindful of disturbing the sacred space where her child had been saved. She approached a section of the clearing where the snow was particularly deep, and with one careful swipe of her claw, revealed something that made my heart skip a beat. Buried beneath the snow were stones, but not ordinary stones. These were carved with runes that seemed to glow with their own inner light, arranged in a perfect circle around what appeared to be an ancient altar. The dragons had not chosen this clearing by chance. It was a sacred place, perhaps older than memory itself. "This place has been a sanctuary for my kind since before your people first took to the seas," the mother dragon explained, her voice taking on a reverent tone. "Here, we have hidden treasures beyond the dreams of mortal men, protected by ancient magic, and the promise that only those pure of heart might claim them." She moved to the center of the circle, where the altar stood covered in centuries of accumulated snow and debris. With delicate precision that seemed impossible for such massive claws, she began to clear away the accumulated layers, revealing intricate carvings that told the story of dragons and humans in ages past. "Long ago," she continued as she worked, "there was a time when our kinds were not enemies. Humans and dragons worked together, shared knowledge and wisdom. These treasures were hidden during the dark times, when fear and greed corrupted the hearts of men and dragons alike. The altar, now fully revealed, was a masterwork of ancient craftsmanship. The stone itself seemed to be carved from a single massive emerald, its surface inlaid with gold and silver in patterns that hurt to look at directly. Symbols and runes covered every inch of its surface, telling stories in languages that had been forgotten before the first longship ever kissed the waves. From a hidden compartment within the altar, the mother dragon withdrew something that made my breath catch in my throat. It was a chest, but not the crude wooden affairs that Vikings typically used to store their treasures. This was crafted from what appeared to be a single piece of crystallized fire, its surface swirling with colors that shifted and changed as I watched. "Ancient gold," she said simply, setting the chest down before me. Not merely the metal that your people prize, but gold touched by dragonfire, blessed by ancient magic, and imbued with power that will never fade. This has waited here for centuries, waiting for one worthy to claim it. I stared at the chest, hardly daring to believe what I was seeing. The gold within, for I could somehow sense its presence, was not just wealth. It was legacy, history, power beyond imagination. With such treasure, I could rebuild my family's fortunes, prove my worth to the clan, perhaps even become a jarl in my own right. Yet, as I reached for the chest, I hesitated. "What you've given me already is beyond price," I said, meeting the dragon's ancient gaze. "You've allowed me to live after showing kindness to your child. That is gift enough." The mother dragon's eyes softened slightly, and I saw approval in their amber depths. "That, Bjorn Ironhand, is exactly why you are worthy of this gift. Take it with the blessing of dragons and the promise that as long as you live with honor, our protection shall be upon you." 3 months had passed since that life-changing encounter in the mountain clearing, and I found myself standing once again in the great hall of Raven's Hollow, but everything had changed. The crystalline chest of ancient dragon gold sat open before the assembled clan, its contents catching the firelight and casting dancing shadows across the faces of warriors who had once whispered doubts about my worthiness. The gold was unlike anything any of us had ever seen. Each piece seemed to pulse with its own inner light, warm to the touch and impossibly pure. When our village's finest craftsman, old Magnus the silversmith, had examined the treasure, his weathered hands had trembled as he spoke of metal that defied all his understanding. "This gold will never tarnish," he had whispered in awe, "never lose its luster. It's as if the very essence of the sun has been captured within each piece." My father's younger brother, Gunnar the Red, stood before the treasure with barely concealed envy burning in his pale blue eyes. As the clan's war chief in my father's absence, he had expected to be the one to restore our family's fortunes through raids and conquest. My sudden return with such impossible wealth had upset the careful balance of power he had been building for months. "Tell us again, nephew," Gunnar said, his voice carrying the honeyed tone he used when plotting mischief, "how exactly you came by such unique treasure. Gold that glows with its own light is not found in any mine known to mortal men." The hall fell silent except for the crackling of the great central fire. 40 pairs of eyes watched me intently, waiting for my response. I had told them the truth once, but few had believed the tale of the dragon and its grateful mother. They preferred to imagine more mundane explanations, that I had perhaps discovered some ancient burial mound or stumbled upon a forgotten cache of Roman gold. Standing tall before my kinsmen, I felt the weight of more than their expectations. The dragon mother's words echoed in my memory. "As long as you live with honor, our protection shall be upon you." I would not dishonor that gift with lies, no matter how convenient they might be. "As I told you before," I said, my voice carrying clearly through the hall, "I aided a dragon pup in the mountains. Its mother rewarded my kindness with this ancient gold. I know it sounds like something from the old stories, but I speak only the truth." Murmurs rippled through the assembled warriors and their families. Some looked skeptical, others intrigued, but I noticed that the wise women of our clan, the Volur who still remembered the old ways, watched me with knowing eyes. They understood that the world held mysteries beyond the comprehension of sword and axe. My cousin Astrid, Gunnar's daughter and one of the fiercest shield maidens in our clan, stepped forward from the crowd. Her red hair caught the firelight like spun copper, and her green eyes held a challenge I recognized from our childhood sparring matches. "Bjorn," she said, her voice cutting through the murmurs, "if what you say is true, then you have been blessed by forces beyond mortal understanding. But with such blessings come responsibilities." She gestured toward the treasure chest, her expression growing serious. "This gold could buy us new ships, better weapons, enough supplies to survive any winter. Or she paused dramatically. It could make us a target for every raider and king, from here to the Mediterranean. What do you propose we do with such power?" It was a fair question, and one I had wrestled with during every day since returning to Raven's Hollow. The ancient gold represented more than wealth. It was a test of character, of wisdom, of the very values that had led to its bestowal in the first place. I had seen what greed could do to good men, how the promise of easy riches could turn brothers into enemies. "I propose we use it wisely," I replied, stepping closer to the treasure so all could see my sincerity. "Not for conquest or personal glory, but to strengthen our community, to ensure that no family in Raven's Hollow goes hungry through the harsh winters, to build defenses that will protect our children from those who would do us harm." Gunnar's laugh was harsh and bitter. "Pretty words, nephew, but this is the real world, not some scold's tale of noble heroes. That gold could make us the most powerful clan in all of Norway. We could take what we want rather than begging for scraps like dogs." "And what would that make us?" I shot back, feeling the first stirrings of anger in my chest. "Pirates and thieves? Is that the legacy you want to leave for your daughter?" Astrid's hand moved to the hilt of her sword, not in threat, but in warning. The tension in the hall was becoming dangerous, and everyone present knew that hot words between kinsmen had started feuds that lasted generations. Yet before the confrontation could escalate further, an unexpected voice spoke from the back of the hall. "The boy speaks wisdom." Old Ragnhild, our clan's most respected Völva, stepped forward with the aid of her carved staff. Her milky eyes, clouded with cataracts, somehow seemed to see more than anyone else's. "I have cast the runes, consulted the ravens, read the signs in fire and water. Great change comes to our world, and those who cling to the old ways of taking and pillaging will be swept away like leaves before the storm." The hall fell completely silent at her words. Ragnhild rarely spoke in public gatherings, preferring to offer her counsel in private to those wise enough to seek it. When she did speak, even the most skeptical warriors listened carefully. "The gods are stirring," she continued, her voice carrying despite its frail tone. "Ragnarök may still be distant, but the world is changing. The southern kingdoms grow stronger, more organized. Their armies march in formations our raiders cannot break. Their ships carry weapons that can shatter shields with thunder and lightning. Those who would survive the coming storm must adapt, must find new sources of strength beyond the sword and axe." She turned her clouded gaze toward me, and I felt as if she was seeing straight through to my soul. "The dragon's gift is not mere gold, young Iron Hand. It is opportunity, the chance to build something lasting, something that will endure beyond the brief flames of conquest and glory." Gunnar scoffed, but I noticed that his hand had moved away from his own weapon. Even he was not foolish enough to openly challenge the Völva's wisdom. "Riddles and prophecies," he muttered. "What use are they against cold steel and bitter winters?" "More use than you know," Ragnhild replied sharply. "But perhaps a demonstration would convince the doubters among us." She turned back to me, her expression suddenly urgent. "The dragon's protection you spoke of, it is real, is it not?" I nodded, confused by the direction her questions were taking. "The mother dragon gave her word that their protection would be upon me as long as I lived with honor." Then you will need it sooner than you think." Ragnhild's voice dropped to barely above a whisper, forcing the entire hall to strain to hear her words. "Even now, Olaf Bloodaxe sails toward our shores with 5 longships and 200 warriors. Word of your treasure has spread farther and faster than wildfire, and he comes to claim it for his own." The impact of her words was like a physical blow. Olaf Bloodaxe was notorious throughout Norway as a raider who showed no mercy to those who opposed him. His crew of berserkers had sacked a dozen coastal villages in the past year alone, leaving nothing but ash and sorrow in their wake. Against such a force, our modest defenses would crumble like sand before the tide. "How long do we have?" Astrid asked, her earlier antagonism forgotten in the face of immediate danger. "They will arrive with tomorrow's dawn tide," Ragnhild replied. "The ravens brought me word not an hour ago." The hall erupted in urgent conversations as warriors began planning defenses and women started gathering supplies for a potential siege. Yet through the chaos, I found myself thinking not of walls and weapons, but of emerald scales gleaming in the morning sun and ancient eyes filled with wisdom and power. Gunnar appeared at my side, his earlier hostility replaced by grim determination. "Whatever our differences, nephew, we are kinsmen. This treasure has made us all targets, but perhaps it can also provide our salvation. That gold could buy us mercenaries, better weapons, ships of our own." I shook my head slowly. "The gold won't save us, uncle, but perhaps the blessing that came with it will." As if summoned by my words, a deep, resonant roar echoed across the fjord, causing every conversation in the hall to cease instantly. Through the great doors, left open to the night air, we could see the sky beginning to lighten with an otherworldly glow. But this was no aurora borealis dancing across the heavens. This light was golden and warm, growing steadily brighter as something massive approached from the mountains. "It seems," I said quietly, feeling a smile spread across my face for the first time in months, "that we are about to receive some very powerful allies." The roar came again, closer now, and this time it was answered by others. Not one dragon approached Ravenshollow, but several, their combined voices creating a symphony of ancient power that shook the very foundations of our hall. Through the open doors, we could see their silhouettes against the starlit sky, magnificent creatures of legend come to honor an oath of protection. Astrid stared at me with new understanding in her green eyes. "The dragon's protection," she whispered. "You weren't speaking in metaphors, were you?" "I never am," I replied, watching as the first of our unexpected guardians settled onto the hill overlooking our village, her familiar emerald scales gleaming in the torchlight. The Dragon Mother had come, and she had not come alone. The ancient gold had indeed been a test, not just of my worthiness to possess it, but of my wisdom in choosing how to use the power it represented. Tomorrow would bring battle, and with it the chance to prove that honor and compassion were not weaknesses to be discarded, but strengths that could forge alliances beyond the understanding of those who lived by sword and fire alone. As dawn approached and Olaf Bloodaxe's ships appeared on the horizon, I stood ready to face whatever came, knowing that I had chosen my path well. The dragons had come to honor their word, and together we would show the world that some treasures were worth more than gold. They were worth everything. 5 years later, I stand now as Jarl of Ravenshollow, watching my young son Eric play in the courtyard with a dragon pup of his own, the youngest offspring of my old friend from the mountains. The child shows no fear of the magnificent creature, and the dragon treats him with the gentle patience I have come to know so well from its kind. Their friendship is a symbol of the new world we have built here, where ancient enemies have become steadfast allies. The battle with Olaf Bloodaxe had lasted less than an hour. When his ships arrived at dawn that day 5 years ago, they were met not by desperate villagers cowering behind wooden walls, but by 5 adult dragons circling overhead like living storm clouds. The berserker warriors, for all their legendary ferocity, had proven remarkably reasonable when faced with creatures that could reduce their longships to kindling with a single breath. Most of Olaf's men had chosen to join our cause rather than face dragonfire, swearing new oaths and abandoning their pirate ways. Those few who refused had been given safe passage to leave our waters, though they departed as changed men, humbled by what they had witnessed. Our village has grown into a prosperous town, then into something approaching a small city. The ancient gold, used wisely as I had promised, has funded not just defenses, but schools, workshops, and trade routes that extend across the known world. We have become a center of learning, where the old ways blend with new knowledge, where dragon lore is studied alongside conventional warfare, where young people come from distant lands to learn the arts of both diplomacy and battle. The dragons have proven to be more than protectors. They are teachers, sharing wisdom gathered over millennia. From them, we have learned new ways to work metal, to predict weather patterns, to heal injuries that would have meant death in the old days. In return, we have shared our own knowledge of craftsmanship, agriculture, and the complexities of human society. My uncle Gunnar serves now as my most trusted advisor, his earlier ambitions tempered by the wisdom that comes from surviving impossible odds. He often jokes that being related to a dragon friend is adventure enough for any man. Astrid has become my war chief and closest friend, her strategic mind and fierce courage proving invaluable in the challenges of leadership. But perhaps the greatest change has been in how our people view the world around them. The old Norse way of taking what you wanted through strength alone has given way to something more complex and ultimately more powerful. The understanding that true strength comes from building alliances, showing mercy to enemies and protecting those who cannot protect themselves. The Dragon Mother, whom I have learned to call Ethrith in the ancient tongue, visits regularly. She has become something of a grandmother figure to the children of our community, sharing stories of ages past when the world was young and full of wonders. Her offspring, now grown strong and healthy, patrol our borders not as conquerors, but as guardians, ensuring that no other Olaf Bloodaxe disturbs the peace we have built. The ancient gold still sits in our treasury, but it has multiplied through wise investments and honest trade. More importantly, it has been joined by other treasures, scrolls of knowledge, works of art, inventions that improve the lives of our people. The true wealth of Raven's Hollow lies not in what we possess, but in what we have become. Traders from as far away as Byzantium speak of our town in hushed, respectful tones. They tell stories of the place where dragons and humans work side by side, where ancient wisdom guides new innovation, where a warrior's mercy earned a friendship that changed the course of history. Some of the tales have grown in the telling, but the core truth remains, that kindness shown to a starving creature on a snowy mountainside can echo through the years in ways beyond imagination. As I watch my son and his dragon companion play in the afternoon sun, I think of my father, Ericsson the Bold. I wonder if he would be proud of the man I have become, of the legacy I am building not through conquest, but through compassion. I believe he would be, for he was the one who taught me that true strength lies not in the enemies you destroy, but in the friends you make and the mercy you show. The world is changing, as old Ragnhild predicted it would. The age of the simple raid and pillage is ending, giving way to something more complex, but ultimately more rewarding. Those who adapt, who learn to build bridges instead of burning them, will inherit the future. Tonight, as I do every evening, I will climb to the highest tower of our hall and look out over the fjord toward the mountains where this all began. The Dragon Mother will be there, I know, her massive form silhouetted against the stars, keeping watch over the community we have built together, and I will remember the lesson that changed my life, that sometimes the greatest treasures come not from what we take, but from what we choose to give. The ancient gold was never the real reward. The real treasure was the understanding that in a world full of darkness, the smallest act of kindness can kindle a flame that will burn for generations. That is the legacy I leave to my son and his dragon friend, the knowledge that heroes are not made by the strength of their swords, but by the courage to show mercy when the world expects vengeance. In the old stories, the dragon was always the monster to be slain. In our story, the dragon became the greatest friend a man could ever hope to have. Perhaps that is the most important change of all, learning to see the world not as enemies to be conquered, but as friends waiting to be made. The age of Ragnarok may still come, but when it does, we will face it not as scattered tribes of warriors, but as allies bound by friendship, honor, and the unbreakable bonds forged in a snowy clearing 5 years ago, when a starving dragon pup taught a would-be hero the true meaning of treasure.